I just finished watching a press conference with the Vice President of the United States, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Oz, and the Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission. And the amount of pervasive fraud here in the United States is amazing. And it's taking place in red states and blue states, but for the most part, these blue states are complicit. Some blue states are, from what the Vice President said, are actively helping the federal government in exposing this. And one of them is the state of Maryland, is actively engaged in helping. And from what I understand, so is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it is pervasive, and I will be getting to that in a minute. But states like Hawaii, Mississippi, Minnesota, Hawaii has failed to prosecute any types of fraud in any federal program over the last, I believe it's last couple of years. But just how bad this fraud situation is here in the United States. Some states don't even try to hide it. SNAP and TAMP fraud is rampant in California, in all the sanctuary states, because by federal law, the 1996 law passed by Congress and signed by President Clinton, it's the Immigration Reform and Immigrant Financial Responsibility Act. That law prohibits people who are in the country illegally or even not U.S. citizens that are here legally from receiving any federal monies, any funds of any kind administered through the state. So that means food stamps, that means TAMP, which is cash assistance, that means WIC. All those state programs are state programs that are administered with federal money. And these sanctuary states, these 14 sanctuary states, are in violation of that law, and by doing so, they're committing fraud against the federal government. In addition to that, it's been exposed that a lot of these states have fraud in daycare systems, fraud in hospice and in-home health care and other programs, including SNAP and TANF. And in certain instances, those they're doing it with the identities of people who are dead and identities that were stolen. And these identities that are stolen, in many cases, they are people who are already on benefits, and because this fraud is occurring with their name and everything, they're cut off from the benefits that they should be receiving, which is really tragic when you have a family, a single mom who depends on these federal resources to at least keep her kids fed, all of a sudden no longer is eligible because somebody's using her identity to commit fraud. And they highlighted all of this in the press conference today. Now I'm going to get involved with a lot of the personal experience I know about fraud, and it's pretty vast. The personal angle is 4 times now my identity's been stolen. 4 times. Just recently I had to have my credit cards canceled and reissued for the 3rd time. So yeah, it's an issue. there are foreign actors, and there's people who are in this country illegally that are participating in that. My brother, fortunately, the private sector does a lot better with fraud than the public sector, because this fraud was caught by my bank, and the purchases were stopped. They were flagged. So, and they were all online purchases. Dead skunk in the middle of the road, just like the song. But yeah, one of my older brothers, he gets a phone call from Best Buy that somebody's trying to buy air conditioners with his credit and his name, but then the people who were trying to buy it referred to each other at different names, and they caught that. And from what I understand, that was a big time identity theft for him, because he had to go through some stuff to get that all straightened out. I have a guy I used to work with named Hector Borda, that worked all his life to put his kids through school, worked all his, he drove POS trucks, really bad trucks, so he could provide for his family. And then right before he retired, he wanted to buy himself a brand new truck, Super Duty, all loaded up, and when he went, his credit was denied. And here it turned out his identity was stolen, and a person was using it to buy vehicles and default on the loans. And he had listed a residence in Arkansas. And here the guy was an illegal alien working in a Tyson food factory. So I don't know whether he ever got that straightened out or got that new truck, but this is the kind of stuff we are dealing with in a nation, the types of fraud that we're dealing with. Now, after I worked in law enforcement for a number of years, I worked in the public school system in a facilities division, and saw a lot of fraud. And they got caught. Reading School District got caught on a number of occasions. And there's published reports to back up what I'm going to be saying. The Reading School District was using their food service department to cater parties, both inside and outside the school district, and they got caught. And here the food service director that they hired was an executive chef that did time in federal prison for drug trafficking. That alone should have been precluded him from being hired, but the school board pushed that under the carpet because the guy was politically connected. So, but when they were doing this, originally the board members, who are all private citizens, not getting paid, they were getting some sodas and some chips, some sandwiches for their meeting. They're not even really entitled to that, but it's a consideration. And some people got in and school board, and the next thing you know, they're getting crab cakes, lobster tail stuffed with crab meat, prime rib, high-end food, while people this is a very impoverished city, more than half the people living in it are well under the poverty line. So they're eating like it's freaking Marie Antoinette, they're eating high on the hog. Well, even though the food service director was a convict, he knew that he was going to have to cover his ass. And he did, because all the purchases he made, he kept the receipts and kept them in a folder to save his ass. And the state agency that administered the federal school lunch program was the Department of Agriculture. And the Department of Agriculture came in, and periodically they audit school districts. And here this food was listed as special orders on the order. And they wanted to know what the special food orders were. And he came out with the file of what it was for, and it went public. And here, it wasn't just this at these school board meetings that were getting food. The word got out, and principals were ordering food for their staff. Teachers were getting catered bridal and baby showers and other events. It was literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of your tax dollars that were being spent on teachers, while the quality of food that was kids were eating was declining. And even in one instance, children in elementary school were served broccoli with cabbage worms in it. And there's published reports to back this up. So, they were served broccoli with cabbage worms in it. So all this came out. Then other instances of fraud came up with the board. And no matter how you change a board within a blue city and a blue state, it's like a deck of cards. You keep shuffling it. You're still going to end up with jokers in the deck. And that's the case. I mean, in one instance, you actually got a Republican on board who was trying to be fiscally responsible. And he was literally, and this is because he had a child in special ed that he ran, he was literally beaten to the floor of a board meeting because he was trying to expose the corruption. I, as a parent, had to sue the school district because they were not providing the services for my son who has Asperger's syndrome. They weren't allowing TSS workers into the classroom. They weren't following the IEP. They actually falsified progress reports. And the person who was in charge of special ed at the time was not qualified, didn't have a master's degree, and guess what? She was a he, pretending to be a she, one of those. All DEI hire. And that was back before people called it DEI. They called it affirmative action, or whatever you want to call it. But this is the level of corruption you find in school districts. They'll get grants to do capital improvements to their buildings, and where that money goes, nobody knows. Read the minutes of a board meeting, and you see a school that the district receives grants from the federal government to put a new roof on a school and replace the boilers and remediate asbestos. And 3-4 years later, that shit still ain't done. Yeah, it's amazing, how they get away with it. The depth of the corruption, you just have no idea how bad it is. I knew about this daycare center shit years before it got exposed in the media. There was a pizza joint that I frequented back up in Reading, Pennsylvania. It was in a strip mall, and right next to it was a daycare center. And the discussion with the pizza shop owner was, there's never any children in there. We don't see them going in and out. We only see adults. We never hear children playing. They have a common wall between the two. There's never a sound from that place. And so they, this is anecdotal. This is just anecdotal. That I became aware of that. And then it just got so pervasive that everybody knew what was going on. At one particular intersection, there were, getting back to this first one I'm talking about, that strip mall, on the other side of the pizza shop that is adjacent to it was a Dollar General. On the other side, the length of the remaining length of that strip mall was all state agencies that were renting space in that strip mall. It was the unemployment office. It was welfare. Well, people who went in for SNAP and TAMP. And then there's a WIC office. All of this in a strip mall that on the far end from them housed a fake daycare center. Now, did they know? How could they not know? There's no kids going in and out. They knew, and they were complicit. Now, about what I was going to say a few minutes ago was about these daycare centers, and how about it was pretty much common knowledge. Excuse me. It was pretty much common knowledge. Sorry. All these strip malls that these daycare centers were in were all developed by the same developer. The same developer. He was converting industrial and commercial properties into these, subdividing them. He did it to a car dealership. He did it to a lot of industrial buildings that were no longer open. And here, on one intersection, you had daycare on the southeast corner, northeast corner, and northwest corner. And the one in the northwest corner was a former factory that was, it was combined use. The lower two floors were commercial, and the upper floors were low-income housing. The southwest corner of that intersection was an industrial abrasive company that also had signage on it that they were supposedly housing a senior daycare center. Now, how is an industrial building housing a daycare center for the elderly? I'm sorry, it's Bike Week in Myrtle Beach, if you haven't heard. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm coughing. I had a bike go by that had really, really smoking. And I love Bike Week. I love bikes. My son owns a Harley. I always wanted to own a Harley. I'm like that old man sitting on a porch that if I had to do it over again, I'd buy a Harley Davidson. But getting back to this level of corruption that with these daycare centers, it goes even further than that. Because these daycare centers went in and started getting grants from yet another agency, the Department of Social Services, to buy vans. These fake daycare centers were then buying vans under the premise that they would use these vans to transport children to and from school from the daycare center. And they were giving grants, and they were buying these vehicles. And then when they bought these 15-passenger vans, they would then turn around and use them as shuttle services to and from airports and other cities. Unlicensed by the state, no licensing from the Public Utilities Commission from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, no license from the Interstate Commerce Commission. In many instances, no insurance, and it's really. One second, I'm gonna try to get over. But, yeah, I'm in a lot of traffic, so if I pause for a second, there's a lot of bikes, a lot of rolling thunder going on, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful, beautiful bikes, beautiful people. Don't let anybody to give you a negative perception of bikers. Bikers are very charitable. They just like to raise hell and have a good time. I know quite a few of them. There's a lot of people here this week representing the Blue Knights on Bike Week. Most Blue Knights, though, are up at the school, not the school, the National Police Week in Washington, D.C. Passing a couple bikes now. Be glad when I get past this one because he has a very loud radio. It's literally shaking my windows. But getting back to the fraud and these illegal tax paid for vans that are people using these fraudulent daycare centers to then purchase vans under a fraudulent pretext as well. These shuttle services, now Reading is kind of like a hub. You're 3 hours from Manhattan, an hour and a half to 2 hours from Philadelphia, 2 hours to Baltimore, 3 hours to Washington, 4 hours to Pittsburgh. So Reading is a hub, and it's a hub also for drug dealers. And these vans are, now I have no proof to back up this assertion, but I am relatively certain that these vans don't just transport people, they transport illicit drugs. So, like I said, these people are driving, and it's gotten to such an extent with these fraudulent shuttle services that in 2019 it put legitimate bus service out of business. Carl R. Bieber Tourways. That's Bieber, not Beaver. Bieber. They were put out of business because they were no longer getting passengers for their New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. runs. So they put them out of business. They put legitimate airport transportation services out of business because they didn't have overhead. They were driving, a lot of their people that were driving were getting paid next to nothing, and they were, in many instances, didn't have a driver's license and weren't in the country legally. Now I'm going to get into some more fraud that affected me directly. And this is, like I said, it's pervasive. It's throughout our country, and something really has to be done about it. And what occurred when my wife and my family moved here to South Carolina was we hired a moving company because I'm too old to move myself. And we hired a moving company that was based in Tampa, Florida. And it says they do all national moves. And when they moved us, they stopped somewhere and went through all our property and took stuff. And I had some very valuable sports memorabilia, and stupidly I had all my totes marked and on what was in it, and they stole a lot of sports memorabilia, including a football that was signed by all the 1972 Miami Dolphins, the perfect season. I had baseballs signed. I had a Pete Rose baseball. I had a lot of Hall of Famers signed baseballs. So they stole that. And then when they got to our apartment, they basically extorted more money out of us to unload the vehicle. They claimed that they weighed it and we were overweight and we had to pay a special fee, which was thousands of dollars to get our stuff. And if we wouldn't have paid that, they would have just taken it and sold it. This is what they did. And knowing what I know about law, that this was going to be a civil tort, there was nothing. We paid it. We paid it. But then after we paid it, I contacted United States Senator Lindsey Graham's office, and they looked into it, and they got back to me, and they said, this is a ring operated out of New York. They've been aware of it for a while, and they're trying to build a case. The DOJ was trying to build a case. Russian mob was doing this, and the drivers were illegally in the country from various countries, and there was nothing they could do about it at that time. They were using rented trucks from Penske. They had no physical address. They had no material assets for the company. They were using burner phones. They had no physical offices. There was no assets for them to go after. We were just screwed. We were screwed royally by fraud. No matter how hard you try to avoid it, you end up paying for it. You end up paying for it in your dollars, of tax dollars. You end up paying for it in so many different ways. It's just unbelievable. And hopefully we can start seeing a lot of this come under control. But there's layers of it. You have the layers of it involving the federal government. You have the layers involving the state governments. State governments being complicit with it or even facilitating it, because there's evidence that Governor Walz's office in Minnesota may have been actually engaging in criminal facilitation for campaign finance. So the depth of fraud here in the United States, the tax dollars being taken from people who need these things, veterans, people who are poor, people who are elderly. If this fraud could be stopped and abolished, or even pruned to a certain level, the solvency in a lot of federal agencies like Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare would be extended for years. And in many instances, people who are legally receiving these benefits actually would probably receive more if this fraud is cut. But Democrats are constantly, the Democrats are really the party of corruption. I could do a whole video about voter fraud. But it's just amazing the amount of fraud. Oh my God, I'm at this for a half an hour. Well, like I said, it's horrible. If you like my content, please follow and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe. God bless, and hang loose.